The Electric Car by Erika Infantino. An electric car is an automobile that is propelled by electric motors using electrical energy stored in batteries or another energy storage device. Although there are 3 different types of electric cars, so let's have a quick look at them. First, there is the hybrid. Then there's the PHEV, which stands for plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which has both the electric motor and the internal combustion that can propel the car. And lastly, there's all electric, which simply means that there's no internal combustion engine and it must be plugged in into an electrical power grid for recharging. Quick history lesson. In 1837, Robert Davidson of Scotland built the first electric car. But it was only in the 1960s that the interest in the electric car rose greatly due to the rising cost and diminishing supply of oil and concern about pollution generated by internal combustion engines. Now let's look at our first lens, the environment. As many are aware, electric cars are environmentally friendly, but what does that really mean? Well, let's look at the situation. The first thing we know about these cars is that hybrid and plug-in electric vehicles can have significant emission benefits over conventional vehicles. EVs produce zero tailpipe emissions. Though, while electric vehicles emit no carbon pollutants, the power plant producing the car may emit them. The electric car is made up of aluminum to be both strong and lightweight. The wheels are also made of aluminum instead of steel. Seat frames and the heart of the steering wheel are made of magnesium, a lightweight metal. The body is made of an impact-resistant composite plastic that is recyclable. Electric car batteries consist of plastic housing. Now, if we look at a regular gas motor car, the car industry uses a tremendous number of materials to build a car, including iron, aluminum, glass, rubber, petroleum products, copper, steel, and others. But a study found that while oftentimes the environmental impact of making electric vehicles is greater than for making gas and diesel vehicles, this is more than made up for by the greater impact of gas and diesel vehicles while they're being used up compared to EVs. Now that we spoke about the effects manufacturing the electric car has on the environment, once the car is in use, that's when its environmental powers are brought to life. On average, electricity in Canada produces about 200 grams of CO2 per kilowatt per hour. This means that an electric car produces about 60 to 80% less CO2 than one that runs on gasoline or diesel. According to NRCan, the average driver in Canada drives 20,000 kilometers over the course of a year. In that time, a gas car would emit more than 3,500 kilograms of CO2 into the air, while the EV would just emit 340 kilograms. If just 5% of Ontario citizens switched to electric cars, Ontario could reduce its CO2 emissions by over 1.9 billion kilograms. In most places, electric cars do lower the smog forming and global warming pollution associated with vehicle use. Electric vehicles powered by a clean electricity grid offer a key pathway to achieving more than 80% reduction in global warming pollution we would need by mid-century to avoid the worst consequences in climate change. Also, electric vehicles can be a significant part of reducing our oil dependency. Now let's do a comparison. The 2012 Honda Civic Hybrid has a combined city and highway fuel system that can do 44 miles per gallon, while the estimate for the conventional 2012 Civic, a four-cylinder automatic car, is 32 miles per gallon. This is to show how much gas can be saved with a hybrid. Now that we spoke about the environmental impact the electric car has and if it's beneficial for the atmosphere, let's move on and see if it's beneficial for our economy. EVs can reduce fuel costs dramatically because of the low cost of electricity relative to conventional fuel. Because they rely in whole or part on electrical power, their fuel economy is measured differently than in conventional vehicles. Miles per gallon of gasoline equivalent to kilowatts per hour for 100 miles are common metrics. Depending on how they're driven, today's light-duty EVs can exceed 100 mpge and can drive 100 miles consuming only about 25 to 40 kilowatts per hour. The average cost for gasoline vehicles is more than double the cost for EVs. The average car spends roughly $1.50 a gallon, while the EV will only take 60 to 75 cents a gallon. Now, let's compare it to a greater depth. In a year, on average, the 2014 Ford Focus, a car that only takes gas, spends $1,594 on fuel, although this price does fluctuate depending on fuel costs. The Toyota Prius plug-in, a hybrid, spends on average $888 on gas a year. The Nissan Leaf, which uses only battery, and since there is no oil involved, the price that's taken into account is only the electricity, and so this is substantially low at $546. Something really interesting about purchasing a hybrid or electric car is that the government gives a tax credit. For example, while the Nissan Leaf is priced at $32,780, buyers get a $7,500 tax credit that can reduce the cost. Tax credit is an amount of money that can be offset against a tax liability. The government even gives tax credits to buyers to the Tesla Roadster. Energy Secretary Steven Chu said the government has invested $5 billion so far to electrify the nation's transportation system in the United States. It provided loans of $2.6 billion to Nissan, Tesla, and Fisker to establish electric car factories, $2.4 billion in grants to establish 30 electric vehicle battery and components, and another $80 million for advanced research and development. The single biggest cost component on all EVs is the battery pack. Tesla does not reveal precise costs on their batteries, but it is estimated that the cost is around $200 to $400 per kilowatt per hour, which means that this is the amount of energy converted if work is done at an average rate of 1,000 watts for 1 hour. So even though the batteries can be expensive, for a round trip of 50 miles, researchers have found that electric cars like the Nissan Leaf, Toyota Prius, Chevy Volt can save you between $700 and $1,000 each year compared to the 2014 Ford Focus. Having these cars can also be beneficial to a country. For example, in 2011, the transportation sector accounted for more than 70% of U.S. oil consumption, and the cost of imported oil totaled more than $300 billion. The typical American household spent a record $4,155 on fuel costs last year, according to the Oil Price Information Service. And so EVs don't only lower fuel costs and reduce oil imports, but the investment in technologies like for the batteries that power EVs offers an opportunity for the United States to lead in an explosive new market and create new jobs. Bloomberg New Energy Finance, which analyzes clean energy markets, has estimated that the advanced battery industry alone could reach $100 billion annually by 2030. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for watching. And always remember, power will change our world. Literally.